I think that, okay, I think that right now why China is emphasizing on the multilateralism, emphasizing the institutional building, because we just want to avoid a kind of certain domination of a certain country or a certain ideology or a certain format. We think this world is totally diversified. China just a common member of the community. We want to contribute. We want to uh, we want to help building this kind of, as we call the new type of the state-to-state relations based on mutual respect, based on justice, and based on win-win cooperation. This is, I think, right now what we are. As far as China-U.S. trade war is concerned, I think a lot of developments are still taking place. But I want to make several points. First, that the current problem within the United States, that the cause is not China. Since 2001, that after September 11, we will see that the United States has initiated a lot of conflicts or wars in Afghanistan, Iraq. And you can see that domestically they have some problem of their economic structure, like the bifurcation or the poverty or the old structure. After 2008, you can see that the United States also is faced. So China definitely will not take the blame. So, but unfortunately, right now, I think according to the United States, they shift the blame and they take the threat from the Chinese side. I won't take it. Second, that for this kind of global economic challenges or trade challenge, China is would like to have a negotiated solution. But I think basic dignity and sovereignty should be respected. If you want a war, we will go with it. But if you want to negotiate, we will more than welcome it. This I think. And thirdly, I think that during this process, more importantly, for the responsible international community, we should pay more attention to the institutional damage of this kind of war. China definitely, we have this quite big economy, but China still, we have 30 million people under the poverty. We have a long way to go when we want to achieve our so-called relatively welfare status. So I think that this is the challenges we are faced, and this is the solutions we would like to advocate if possible. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Excellency. I guess I want to bring it back to you, Madam Tahmina Janjua.
As obviously being irrelevant in a situation where economic ties are strengthened and there's much trade. That's one side of the picture. But the other side of the picture is the fact that the Indo-Pacific strategy is the one that is being very, I would say aggressively, if I may use the word, pursued by the US Department of Defense. Its recent report, the Indo-Pacific Strategy report, clearly identifies that there is an objective and who are the allies that are going to be brought in, sucked in, into this framework where China would be sort of, quote unquote, dealt with. It's clearly stated in there. And this flows also from the discussion that is held in the academic circles in the US as well. Professor Mancheimer of the University of Chicago has been referring to the strangulation of China. Now, the strangulation of China is not only from the economic side, which to some effect is being done, but there's sort of a pressure, release pressure. You meet together, you're going to have another conversation. There may be possibilities of dealing with it, then you come with more sanctions or more whatever, tariffs, etc. So there is a confusion in the United States, in the mind, if I may say so, of the president, if I may say so, of how to deal with this economic situation that is to deal with. Whether it's India, where they stopped GSP for them, or the tariff issues that they've been dealing with China as well, there is confusion there. Militarily, they are concerned as well, because militarily, and you see this in this new report that comes out of how they want to expand within the Asian Pacific region as such. Responding to that is this new paper that's been presented by China itself, which is the one on the defense, its defense strategy paper. The exact title is different, where it also goes and presents its own desires on how to deal with a situation where China has arrived in a big way on the economic side, but militarily is also has built up enough to pose a threat in the minds of those who were used to a unipolar world, like the United States. So there is that thing happening there. But then the question that's asked also is, are we close to a Cold War, in a Cold War situation? As the ambassador of China has said, Ambassador Yao has said, China has dealt with these issues prudently in the past. It's taken a long time for China to be where it is now. He's referred to the 300 million people that are still living under the poverty line. So there's a lot of investment that needs to be done internally. And hence, while they will not stand the muscular posture of the United States in many ways, they're ready, as it's visible, to discuss these issues as well. So we are not necessarily slipping into a Cold War situation, because the sagacity of the Chinese leadership. You know, I was at a meeting where there was this NATO guy sitting next to me, and he said the problem, this is about 5 years ago, when Mr. Obama was a president. He said the problem with the world today is that it has no visionary leadership. What there is visionary leadership in President Xi, and that visionary leadership is helping the BRI, for example, the Belt and Road Initiative, the fact that it's expanded economically in many parts, has expanded in many parts of the world, and brings the possibility of a degree of economic improvement in Africa, in Asia as well. Is the one way, one role in which they can deal with the situation. Of course, the United States right now, as the ambassador is quite rightly focused as well, is also right now focused on its election next year. And that would require some muscular sort of representations or whatever. On the fact that whether China has the space because it has less possibility of movement of information. You yourself said that today people read less and go to the Twitter more. China has its own information base within China where the information is passed on. Whether the Chinese people should be open to the kind of crass conversations that go on in the Western media is something, of course, it's up to the Chinese people to decide. I think the Chinese people are not restrained. They do move around. You go globally and you meet. So the Chinese are all over the world. They're as students, as professors, as tourists. So they do have that kind of interaction.
So let me take that point, madam, if you'll allow me, and actually frame a question and come back to His Excellency. And Jalil Saab, I'm going to come back to you in a moment, but I think this is a really important. So I think when we talk about this information issue and China's different approach, there tends to be kind of a binary between the traditional Western liberal version of the way the world should be, with a totally free flow of information, and a guided conversation or public discourse, which is one way of describing how the Chinese model should be. But I'm not sure it's entirely binary, and I'm not sure it's actually polar, because in many ways, the surveillance state, if you will, in many countries, not just in China, enables the leadership of those countries to actually know the pulse of their people better than sometimes what a Gallup survey would do. I'm positing this not as a belief, but as a potential question, that the assumed dominance, moral dominance, or moral hierarchy in which totally free flows is naturally better, especially given the, what did you call it? It was a really good framing. I mean, there are negative aspects to the crassness, that's the word. Since I have no crassness in me, I don't even know the word, so I needed and not to suggest that you did, you just have a better vocabulary than me. So the crassness of this discourse is actually, like, why can't we be more embracing of the fact that it is crass, and therefore it does deserve to be dealt with somehow, and whether that's a set of restrictions, or a limitation, or a Chinese the Great China firewall, or whatever it is. I guess what I'm building towards is, why is a Pakistani having to make this argument? And where is the public diplomacy from China about the Chinese model of democracy? The Chinese democracy was it was the name of an album, younger people will know. It was the name of an album by Guns N' Roses many years ago. And it was a mockery, obviously, of the Chinese system. But there is such a thing as Chinese democracy. The technological ingress of knowing what people are thinking and saying and feeling enables the Chinese Communist Party and the leadership to actually, from the local level all the way to the Politburo, to the top, to actually understand what their people want. And of course, given that we are so programmed in a certain model of democracy that requires writing down something on a piece of paper and putting it in a box, where is the assertion that your model, Excellency, is working for you and can work for other countries? Why haven't we seen a democracy and governance program from the Chinese embassy that supports the transition of democracies in other parts of the world, certainly on the Belt and Road to at least examine the benefits of an evolved version of democracy that you may already have reached? I don't believe any of what I'm saying. I still am firmly wedded to a Western concept of democracy. But I wonder why that argument isn't being made by China or by friends of China anywhere.
Thank you. I think, first of all, that I want to make it clear. Every nation has its own history. Every nation has its own features as far as the governance, as far as the history. So like the free flow of the information. So the Western countries, the so-called free flow of information is really—
Excellency, could you, because
Okay.
I'm getting complaints, if you could hold up the mic yourself and actually speak into it, I think it'll really benefit. We
Okay.
now have, mashallah, a full room, and everyone's really
Yes.
keen to hear every word you say.
I think that I can speak louder. Yeah, in fact, yeah, what is the free flow of the information?
You hold this.
If the free flow of the information, according to our understanding, right now the information basically, I think, is dominated and manipulated by the Western media. Is it free? Is it thorough? Is it complete? In fact, we don't think so. You can see a lot of distorted or misinformation. So, but I think that the Western countries are dominating the technology, network, or the conception about that. And the second, regarding the format or China's democracy model, I don't think that we are going. China, definitely we have our own exercise, practice of the democracy or our own governance. It is based on our own 5,000 years experience and history. But China will never, trying to exert this kind of format, this kind of model, or this kind of governance to other countries. So that is why China right now is very, very actively pursuing the internationally recognized norms, like the United Nations, like WTO, like international laws. Right now, when we are dealing with our own business, when we are dealing with our own domestic issues, of course we have our own system. But if you are dealing with your own business by other countries, what you can get from China is just a respect and understanding and non-intervention. So I think this is the basic principles for China's foreign policy. However, but this world is very much globalized and is a kind of interdependence, the world. However, when the free flow of capital, when free flow of the technology, when the free flow of the information in this regard, I think this is the area China would like to promote. But the current free flow, I think, is far from free, far from fair yet. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. So I'm going to hand you the mic, Jalil Saab, and ask you, I guess I'm still kind of stuck on this. I mean, the Chinese won't listen. Clearly, Ambassador Yao does not, does not believe that China should impose. But
all right, okay. But before I respond to your question, Musharraf, I would like to make a brief comment on what the Honorable former Minister Khurram Dastagir Sahab had mentioned about the reversal of Pakistan's policies vis-a-vis China or vis-a-vis the US. I think that our relationship with China remains extremely close, and every time there is a situation, either a bilateral situation or a regional situation or a global situation, the first country that we approach for consultation is China. On China-Pakistan Economic Corridor also, I think the work is progressing very well. And again, on China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, we have heeded to the advice of China to make less noises and make steady progress. And this is something that we are undertaking at the moment. We also need to realize that we don't have strategic convergences with the United States of America of the kind that we had in the earlier years of Pakistan's existence for a variety of reasons. We have, at the same time, there is a desire in Pakistan to have good relationship with the United States of America, as there is a desire on the part of the US to have good relationship with Pakistan. So basically, this good relationship syndrome is meant to retain each other's goodwill for the promotion of their respective interests at the global and the regional level. One thing that I would again like to mention, that we have never played our close relationship with one major power at the cost of our relationship with the other. Even we need to realize that Pakistan-China relationship are a very, very old relationship. This is a relationship as old as the existence of China, or for that matter, the existence of Pakistan as an independent sovereign country. But at this, and this relationship remained extremely close, even while we had strategic convergences with the United States of America. And if you recall, that Pakistan had always played the role of a bridge between US and China. Secretary Kissinger had devoted a whole chapter in his book on China as to the kind of role that Pakistan played in the 70s in order to bring about a rapprochement between the United States of America and Pakistan. When I say that we don't have the kind of strategic convergences, because we see a visible tilt in the last several years, particularly since the mid-90s, the US tilt towards India. Building a strong strategic relationship with India has been described as one of the most important foreign policy objectives of every US administration since Clinton times. And then we also witnessed that the kind of impartial policies which were being pursued by the United States of America in respect of Pakistan and India have been replaced by a kind of a partial tilt towards India. So that's probably the reason that we maintain that while retaining good relationship with the US and Pakistan is important, but the kind of relationship that Pakistan has with China, that relationship is something which is irreplaceable.
So I think that's a great segue into the question that I asked you, Jalil Saab, which is that part of the confusion globally, not just China, not just Pakistan, but China has many partners, smaller countries with a lot of potential that benefit from the relationship with China, but that suffer a lot of what I would call Western propaganda about what it means to be friends with China. And a lot of the English-speaking elites in these countries only consume that propaganda as their entirety of the news and analysis. And so the question I keep going back to, and
rise. If you look at the overall global landscape, almost 64 countries have become part of this Belt and Road Initiative, and including many of the European countries are now looking at seriously the economic model. Italy, for that matter, has...
They attended the second BRI forum recently.
They have signed into the BRI. Switzerland has also signed into BRI. You mentioned about propaganda. Basically, there are 3 or 4 themes which are being propagated. One is a theme related to debt trap, which is absolutely a kind of a strange kind. The other is that this Belt and Road Initiative is an exclusive project and not an inclusive project. Third, which is again based on misinformation or lack of understanding of the Belt and Road ideology of that it will give China military footprints in the countries with which it is. So these are the kind of propaganda themes that we need to counter, and we need to counter with jointly with China. But unfortunately, I see that the kind of coordination that we have in this region, we don't witness that kind of a coordination at the Western capital, where this propaganda is being made with a louder pace.
Okay, so I was going to come to you, and just hold on to that thought. I also want to frame a question.
In the last 3 days, is that we'll have to go into a more deeper and candid relationship with China on military and strategic matters than we have had so far. And it's this, our legacy, part of it, which is the English language in which we are all speaking today, is that we consume the English language publications that come out, and therefore they have their certain slant. But it would require us and our militaries, Air Force, navies, to be in a much more constant and deeper conversation about where the world is going. We have not had it so far, I will be candid with you. It's been more a discussion on what kind of equipment can we get from China. So a strategic thought process, while we were in government, was not really visible. Yes, there were occasional discussions, a lot of visits from one country to the other, but the kind of shaping up of strategic environment in cooperation with China has not occurred yet, to my knowledge. It might have, some people might have a different view. The second thing is, I think, and concomitant to that, what we've been discussing is, the kind of propaganda against China that we have seen is, and some of it was visible on this stage yesterday also, that, Sahiwal power plant is bad, okay? My counter question to that is, China has made these investments in Pakistan, and it made them at a time when no one else was willing to invest. And yes, we can argue about the economic feasibilities. But on the other hand, we are yet to question in the same way how Jacobabad and Shamsi air bases could be handed over to the United States. That was a much greater loss of sovereignty than China investing in Pakistan. Similarly, the giving up of ground lines of communication and air lines of communication, which continue apart from that brief period in 2011, continue.
It was from 29th November 2011 to the 4th of July 2012.
So this question is that we really have to be seen that with the US, we have had a much greater loss of sovereignty than we have experienced because of a particular Chinese mindset, which is very welcome, of not imposing on other countries. So yes, they have invested, but the massive loss of sovereignty that we saw and this is not just after 9/11, it was also the Badaber Air Base in Peshawar back in the 60s. So these are the kind of strategic conversations that we need to have because it's very easy, and we have been seeing this, to malign China as being overbearing on Pakistan, when the fact is that the United States, in particular, has been far more intrusive and overbearing in Pakistan than we have seen so far with China.
So we're coming to I really want to take it to the audience, but I know you have a couple of points. So if you could make those quickly, and then we'll go to the audience.
Quick points. States or the Western world does it, and the ambassador of China has clearly pointed it out that the Western media, that the media is obviously completely taken over by the Western thought processes as such. Strategic thought processes that you've been referring to, Dastagir Saab, there have been discussions, and I'm witness to it, at the military level amongst all the Air Force, the Navy, and whatever, on the strategic, deep strategic conversations. So they are ongoing. On CPEC, you said that the language and the, what was the word that you used? The language and something was different. I can tell you that having been part of the Prime Minister's delegations in the last 1 year, the language has been warm, has been clear, and has been effusive. It's clear that there is strong support within Pakistan for CPEC at the governmental level. There is obviously people who will continue to talk about it, as in other parts of the world, about CPEC or other Chinese projects. But there's clarity. It's clarity at the government level. There has been a shift in gear from infrastructure to agriculture and other areas. So that may be the reason why there's been a slowing where work is in progress, where there is this agreement on industrial development, etc., that is being done. So I think there will be naysayers. There will continue to be people who will talk against CPEC or against projects in any part of the world. But I don't think it's fair to say that there is a lessening of the warmth on that score. Thank you.
Thank you so much, madam. I just think it's a matter, and this is my personal opinion, and luckily I don't have any of them.
A direct view of Pakistan and can learn about what's happening in Pakistan, what Pakistan is thinking, what Pakistanis are thinking. There is, as I said, and I count myself as a profound Western bias in Pakistan because of the language, because of the history. But the future movements of how the economies and trade is happening. One of the singular facts about this 21st century world is that the previous paradigm of that developing countries could only get rich by exporting to the prosperous West is just smashed and on the ground, because now you could trade with each other and be prosperous. You can gain prosperity. So that is what should drive us towards having, as I said, not only a strategic relationship with China and more deeper dialogue about where the future is going, but also this media relationship, some effort will have to be made. It won't happen by itself.
I suspect Ahmed is also, he's doing it subtly, and if he's not, I'll do it for him.
I agree with Amara about the generational gap. But a lot of young media emerging on the scene. There is absolutely no doubt about it, because the scene, if you look at the media scene, the cub journalists who joined maybe 5-6 years ago, they have also come of age, and they are doing an excellent job. And then you see a lot of younger people at the corporate sector also, who are taking the lead in the decision-making process, because this is something, if you interact with various chambers of commerce in the country, that is the. But I entirely agree with you that much more needs to be done to involve the younger generation at the policy formulation level. In response to Amir Rana Saab's question, I would say that the Western media does not take their cue from what they hear from me or you or from here and there. There have been ample studies which have been carried out that when it comes to important foreign policy issues, they also take their cues from the respective institutions, as is the case with the Pakistani media in respect of issues related to India, or for that matter, the Indian media in respect of the issues related to Pakistan, when they would become a spokesperson or the mouthpieces of the respective governments. Similarly, the Western media is not different. Maybe the quality or the scale is a little different, but this is something which is going on. To give you one example, for instance, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. One question which I often hear while talking to the media personnel in the West, or for that matter, the think tank community, Pakistan will get caught in a debt trap. What kind of a debt trap? When I ask them that, are you really aware the dynamics of the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor and the kind of investments they are taking place? 70% of the investments are in the shape of investments. It is only 30%, which is the loan component, and that too at very soft terms and conditions, not more than 2%, which is almost free. They get surprised because this is the line that they have heard from certain institutions. Military footprints. When I ask the media personnel in the West, have you seen any military footprints of as part of China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, either in Pakistan or for that matter any other country which are becoming part of Belt and Road Initiative? They say that no, but this is what our institutions, they tell us that it is not a purely economic project. What I mean to say that this is something which is a dilemma that we have to face. And again, I would basically say that Pakistan and China, we need to be a little more aggressive in responding to this kind of propaganda that is being made out on various issues, particularly related to Pakistan and China cooperation and relationship.
I guess one way to respond to that, and I don't want to speak for Ahmed, but somebody might say, well, one way to do it is to respond to alleged propaganda. The other way to deal with it is to have a freer flow of information between the two countries and peoples that would automatically tackle that propaganda and actually shape a new Pak-China narrative, which in terms of the people-to-people realm, I think is a lot weaker than it should be. Our G-to-G relationship is brilliant and deep and rich and not under threat. Even if Murad Saeed or Razak Dawood make whatever statements they make, it's strong enough to withstand those kinds of things. But the people-to-people thing is I think, the point about a free media having the ability to project each other's cultures and values and
before they would dispense any funding. And this should give all of us some food for thought.
So I think, we kind of have gone from a global.
Foreign affairs, if you're talking about discussions at the strategic policy level. The participation of young and old is very much there. I retired 3 months ago. I still consider myself young, but I was 60 when I retired. And there are very young people who continue to contribute in a very significant manner to conversations within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs on issues of critical importance. The second question about the media interaction and the fact that there needs to be, there is a sort of a cultural context as well as far as China, Pakistan writings, readings, conversations are concerned. When you read a Chinese paper on a certain aspect of CPEC, you see it differently. And when the Chinese obviously see a Pakistani paper on CPEC or conversation on CPEC, so there has to be more, as you say, more people-to-people interaction for understandings to develop on the conversations that have to take place within the context of CPEC. There is flow of information, but there is perhaps the need for greater understanding between the policymakers and others, and the public at large, on what these concepts. We as Pakistanis think differently in many ways than the Chinese do. So we need to have more regular conversations for them to be able to understand. And I can tell you in my conversations at the policy level with my Chinese counterparts, the deputy foreign ministers, for example, the deeper the conversations, the greater the understanding has been. And that's what's necessary. Thank you.
Thank you so much, madam. The junior Riaz Khokar, not the one sitting right in front of me, but the one sitting.
The timeline. CPEC agreements were due to be signed, remember, in September 2014, 2 months after Zarb-e-Azam had begun in June. They were signed 4 months after Army Public School.
Part of this China-Pakistan economic corridor, they are thinking in line of economic interests which were involved, which were the main driving with the US to put pressure on India. I don't think that's kind of a relationship with India forms part of the main foreign policy objective in relationship as a region. It is made part of the Quad, against that coalition which is being seen as perceived as a coalition against China. And then, beginning of this year, and that was Kamkasa. Kamkasa is the India. Basically sharing with them the kind of strategic and intelligence information that they share with them. Kamkasa means that in case of, if there is a conflict between Pakistan or India, or China and India, very frankly, either in the media or within certain other sections of society, it is devoid of any concrete or solid information. I would very strongly recommend a debate should take place on these issues, whether it's China-Pakistan economic issues or other global issues. But the only request that one would make is that debate should be very well informed. It should be based on solid facts and not on what you hear from here and there. That's the kind of response I would like to.
I think that, Jalil, please.
That the US will help India read your WhatsApp.
Well, I was about to end on a really positive note with what Jalil Abbas Gilani had said there. Utter fear as to what is about to be exposed, thanks to Khurram Dastagir's exposition about what is and what is not vulnerable in terms of information. I just wanted to thank each of the panelists for their patient, calm, measured, and really thoughtful and deep comments.
Are we okay with India unilaterally withdrawing from Simla Agreement? Next will be their abrogation of the Indus Water Treaty. BJP has made it well known that its resentment about the Indus Water Treaty. Do you think the US or the World Bank, led by it, can arm twist India into getting back into it once it leaves it? Is there a military solution to this crisis, this unprecedented national crisis that Pakistan is facing? What would amassing forces on the border accomplish? We cannot nuke Indian forces on the other side to save the day for the Kashmiris. And lastly, in less than 5 years, once Hindu settlements have taken place and India goes to the United Nations to say, let's have a plebiscite, it would be in a position of strength. When will we be in that position vis-a-vis AJK and Gilgit-Baltistan, who have serious questions?
These issues that Rabia has raised, and also to inform the audience, because people are not, you are all experts in this area. So I think that if you could sort of expand a little on what Article 370 was and what are the roots of the current crisis, this immediate trigger, what has happened and what you think are the implications of it, and of course, in addition to addressing Rabia's questions, we would be very grateful.
Thank you very much, Ali, and thank you, Jinnah Institute, for the invitation. I think this is an extremely important subject. What has happened in the last 72 hours, Prime Minister Modi has brought about a very, shall we say, radical and very substantive change in the situation. So he has not only presented the people of Jammu and Kashmir with a fait accompli, he has also presented Pakistan with a fait accompli. Well, the decision is clearly violative of the Indian Constitution, it is violative of the UN resolutions, it's violative of the Simla Agreement and the Lahore Declaration. The point is that he has done it, and I don't really see any prospects of any reversal. There was earlier on some talk about the possibility of the Supreme Court of India reversing the situation, but I have a feeling that the substantial change, because the BJP is very committed to the program that they have followed. I do agree with you that we not only see the next 5 years of Modi being in power, and mind you, let's not ignore this fact that whatever decision he has taken is a popular decision in India. The bulk of the people of India support this, as I say, very courageous step taken by Modi to not only, of course, they were already in occupation of India, but it's now total annexation. So it's not an unpopular decision. Even if you look at the composition of what happened in the Lok Sabha, 367 voted for it. And of course, there have been voices, different views being expressed by some dissidents and also the political parties. But I have a feeling in the ultimate analysis, they'll all go along with this thing for the simple reason that he has done the dirty work for the other political parties. So while the Congress is making some noises now, but I think by and large they will go by it. Now, the choices are very, very complex. Earlier on, the Afghanistan situation was discussed here, and we are now discussing Kashmir. But at the moment, of course, the situation in Kashmir is, I mean, the Indians have put the entire valley into a pressure cooker. So we don't know what's happening and what's going to come out of it eventually. But it is, I think there is reason to believe that there will be a very serious uprising in Kashmir itself. Now, the problem for Pakistan is, what can Pakistan do? There are no military options. I think that's, frankly, I would rule them out. And that's a very dangerous road to take, because there's the prospect of a conventional war leading into something else. And I would say that some of the ministers who made statements in the parliament have been very, very, very silly, where they've talked in terms of, that we've got nuclear weapons and we can do this and we can destroy India. I think this is nonsensical. The sensible approach is to see what other options that Pakistan has. Of course, we are going to the United Nations Security Council, but there again, the question is, what will they debate? The world has been presented with a fait accompli. India is not going to reverse it. So the pressure will again be on India and Pakistan to see what can best come out of the wreckage that has been caused. I think that's probably the sort of approach that the international community will take. You know, there's no morality in international relations, there's no conscience in the international community. In a way, what Modi has done is that he has gone in for the kind of Israeli approach, Israeli solution to the Palestinian. Now, what happens inside Kashmir, I think that is the most critical thing. I think there are other very serious consequences because, as I said, there are no military solutions. But there will be, I think there's going to be a resurgence of some militant groups, I'm sure within Pakistan. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, the Taliban made an announcement yesterday or day before yesterday that they will be supporting the Kashmiri movement and they'll get involved. I think the word that they use is that they will get involved. It's not only the Taliban, but if once Afghanistan settles down, I'm not so sure it'll settle down, but the prospects are that there are several other groups operating in Afghanistan who will be very happy to prove their skills in Kashmir. So I only see more trouble. I only see more, shall we say, headaches developing for Pakistan. And the main point is, are we equipped to deal with it? We had a debate, we saw the debate in the last 2 days. Of course, they came out with a joint unanimous resolution that was very good. But the question is that, is Pakistan as a country really united? Does it really have the capacity and the capability to deal with this kind of a situation? Of course, we are taking very many diplomatic steps. We're in briefing capitals. We're in, the Prime Minister is in touch with a number of world leaders. But I'm not sure that this is going to result in anything concrete for Pakistan. Eventually, we will really be pushed towards some degree of acceptance. I know it's an extremely difficult thing to say, but it appears that that is the sort of ultimate role. One more thing I wanted to say is that as far as India-Pakistan relations are concerned, normalization is way far away. I don't see any prospects of that. I don't see any negotiations with India, although I've heard that they are talking in terms of I think some people in the Indian government have said that this will not affect the Simla Agreement and the Lahore Declaration, and that on the basis of that, perhaps there could be some talks in the future. But this is all, I think India is set on a course. Their whole program of Hindutva is on the march in a big way. A lot of things have been happening. I agree with her that I do see that not only Modi will continue, I mean, he's got his 5 years, but he may even continue till 29. But Amit Shah is the next man in, and he's a man who's more committed to this Hindutva program than Modi. So I'll stop here and perhaps later on.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Riaz Khokhar Sahab. That was a very succinct yet very broad-ranging presentation that you have made, where you've actually raised very, very critical issues. And Fatmi Sahab, I would request you to take this forward by drawing from what Riaz Sahab has said, to explain to us, on the one hand, we have had a consensus in Pakistan, a political consensus, on peace with India or on seeking peace with India, certainly in the political parties. Under these circumstances, is it even viable to have that kind of policy anymore? Is, I think, a very important question that really needs to be addressed. The other thing, of course, is that if all bilateral treaties, agreements, even the Indian Constitution itself, is up for unilateral
nations, and the Kashmiri uprising will force India to go for violations, then India's case will start weakening. And there'll be voices raised within India as well as to whether Modi's decision to revoke 370 and thereby try to integrate Kashmir was the right thing to do. Because as far as the ground reality was concerned, they had as much power in the occupied territory as any occupying power does. So it is more, in my view, a political gambit for Modi to enhance his own credibility, and as reportedly Sushma Swaraj said, I don't know whether it's true, that I wanted to see this happen before I die. Well, she has died, but I can tell you this issue is not going to die, because the Kashmiris are just not going to take it lying down. They have proven, hats off to them, they have not been cowed down, they have not been willing to accept this barbarity, just like the Palestinians haven't. And yes, the Israeli experts and specialists are advising India, we all know that, and the Israeli Prime Minister is going to share more of his experience next month when he goes to Delhi. But notwithstanding all of this, this flame of freedom that burns brightly in the heart of every single Kashmiri man, woman, and child, if the Indians had been able to extinguish it, they would have extinguished it decades ago. The challenge is actually for us whether we can maintain the level of support, the degree of commitment, and continue to pursue a policy that is wise and yet restrained and yet responsible. So the challenge is for us whether we come up to this test. This is actually a test, in my view, more for Pakistan than for the people of Kashmir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. I think that we must take advantage of having these very eminent experts with us and open this to the audience, to questions from the audience. And I would like to begin with Aziz Saab, who is right here, and because we would like to have his view on this matter. And Salman Saab, we have our sir. And Dr. Mayo Khan is also there. What a wonderful set of people we have. I think that we need.
Except the bright young millennials and the wonderful GI team headed by Salman Zaidi and Meera, where is Meher, Mariam, who just got married and is run here. Who else have I missed? Amir and Wilson. And the whole team. It's been a heavy lift. Thank you very much. I just want to close out. I see a lot of our policy community. I just do this when ministers don't show up to committee meetings. I call them out. And Khusro Bakhtiar with national security sessions day after day, today and yesterday and even tomorrow. Even I was caught up in one this morning. It's not business as usual, ladies and gentlemen, in Pakistan. Let's be very clear about that. It is not business as usual. And I do want to say one thing. We were going to discuss China, connectivity, CPEC, but you know, history really overtook us. And I say this again. I don't think many of us have still computed the impact of what just happened on August 5th. We were briefing, and we do this in the Foreign Relations Committee at Jinnah Institute, everywhere in Parliament. My chambers are flooded with diplomats seeking advice, wanting to make cables. And you know what we tell them? They're asking a fair amount of routine questions. We tell them even last year, the same Ideas Conclave ran one of the most vibrant India-Pakistan sessions. It was full of hope. The Indian High Commissioner, Ajay Basaria, people were tense about him. He made some very, very hopeful remarks that was showing a way forward of coordinated, sustainable dialogue between the two countries. That statement was welcomed by and large, and it was welcomed across the political board. The spirit is welcomed, and I regret that he's not able to be here today with us because of how events have played out. Events have really overtaken the politics, the course of day-to-day events and business. Trade is suspended between the two countries. And our manifestos, I speak with all inclusive identities today as a woman, as a politician, as a lawmaker, as somebody who has put this think tank together on the basis of an inclusive identity, on an inclusive Pakistani identity, which, as somebody said brilliantly yesterday, we include many identities within us and they're negotiable, they're not fixed. That is the wonder of being a citizen, which is the only country we are full citizens in these days, with the rise of exclusivist ideologies everywhere in the world. So we need to ask ourselves, all our manifestos for change, and I speak even for the political party I am a part of, and many others now, mainstream political parties, even a year ago, were all united. And it took a lot of hard work, and this is what Jinnah Institute also does. We were all united on one thing, and that is we want peace in the region. This is a big change for those of you who are 30-something. It was not always like this. And suddenly, to me, who's going to be 60 in 2 years, yes, you know, these milestones matter because history is changing in front of our eyes. Now, what Humayun Khan will be able to tell you will be different. And a nation that has no sense of history will not be able to change its cycle. So I'm just entirely ad-libbing. My speech was about something else. But really, we have to think of how, and I was listening to very, very erudite, informed, and I would say richly academically advised, diplomatically advised comments. And one thing I did not agree with, I know that there is a reality, there's a norm that nations and diplomats, and I say this repeatedly, states rather, not nations, are taught to defend their interests before anything else. But actually, no. Humanity has changed. This is where the nature of power has changed. It has changed over the centuries. We are not the beast we were 100 years ago. We may be becoming another one, but we were not the beast we were 100 years ago. And why do I say that? There was a reformation in Islam, in Christianity, in global civilization, even after the 2 world wars. And I agree with Fatmi Saab, yes, diplomats must do that. I have no training as a diplomat. But I have trained myself as a humanist, as so many others have. But when I'm negotiating for my country, I'm ruthlessly negotiating for its rights, as I must, and its interests. But in that ruthlessness, I must be greater. I must seek to be greater than that small good. I must seek to build equities for a win-win for larger constituencies than just myself. And those are the win-wins that actually, without defining it, without articulating it properly, Pakistan was invested in until this happened. Until, let's call a spade, the annexation of Kashmir took place forcibly and illegally by India. It is an annexation. Pakistan does not believe in Article 370. Pakistan, and I'm not making a pulpit thumping speech. I'm not happy about downgrading status. Somebody recommended it. I did not recommend it. I'm not happy about breaking trade because the common people will suffer. But this is what states do, and they must do to send a message, particularly when they have a limited set of options. Because in the age of nuclear deterrence, your options are indeed limited. That is the whole point of deterrence. Is it not, gentlemen, in the front row who know, and the second row and the third row, and all the way to the back, and women who know more than I do? So what are your options? A subset of conventional wars that will bleed the region dry and lead to another dystopia, many of failed states we see in the Middle East? Great powers will be protecting their interests. And sometimes I see the Afghanistan conversations sounding almost surreal. They're like a PowerPoint in a parallel universe. Yes, we must seek peace. But who is managing Pakistan's risk over there? The Americans are managing their risk. Are the Afghans able to manage theirs? I did not ask this question. Is Afghanistan even solvent? And will it even remain Afghanistan? And what will happen to Pakistan if that happens? I mentioned Karachi as a reason. It is transformed demographically. Yes, we are a city of refugees because we are prosperous, we provide jobs on the fly, on the street, in the informal economy, in the formal economy. Even now, there is investment happening in Pakistan and in Karachi, especially Karachi. It is just a city born of hope amongst dystopias. And indeed, the refugees have made it what it is, but they've also unmade it. And we must be very clear where we stand. We are an inclusive nation. Our identity is based on inclusivity, as Mr. Jinnah advised and said in that August 11th speech. And look what happened on August 5th, 6 days ago to August 11th. India just reset history. If this was Francis Fukuyama, he would say history began afresh in South Asia, and perhaps in Asia, and perhaps even the world. Because let's be very clear, what will happen in Kashmir will not stay in Kashmir. It will not. That is the nature of this conflict. It was internationalized by Jawaharlal Nehru as the Kashmiri Pandit Prime Minister of United India, the new India, and it remains on the UN dockets with UNSC regulations. Now, people say those are a cliche. My dear, ask a woman who lives around me, and I recognize them, and they do need cliches. They do need the laws that have become cliche. They do need to use them. They need to, sadly, they're even dying for. I did not make the speech in Parliament because I was busy making a resolution. I fear for how the center is working here. It took us about 6, 7 lawmakers from all parties. When Pakistan is about to profit internationally, you can put us all in jails, we will come together for Pakistan without demur. I was told to spend the whole expertise or political experience, shall we say. So the world just sees these divisive speeches. That's not really what happens. As the only parliamentarian in the room and someone who has a seat at the table, I should tell you this. But the center must hold, and you must build consensus by not polarizing Pakistan at one of its most. Ahmed Rashid also, when I was editor Herald, I said just start with saying Pakistan ek dorahe pe hai. Pakistan is at a crossroads. Because when are we not? Right? But today we really are at a crossroads. Tone changed over the interview. He was taking his regular line, how will Pakistan react, militancy, etc. at the end of the day, he said, but you know, I think, how does this even affect you in Islamabad as a politician? I said, how does it not? How does it not? When I get direct messages, this is the world of the digital platform, for God's sake. I just messaged somebody back in Kashmir saying, I haven't been in touch with my family for so long, we are still under siege. And I said, can we tell us what we can do? Tell us what we are doing wrong and tell us what we are doing right. And many whose names, political leaders in Kashmir, whose names I won't take for fear of endangering their lives. But we are on those platforms, and I said to this man, when they're telling me that, you know, they're beating down our doors, I don't think I will see you tomorrow. When my friend and journalist, the iconic Shujaat Bukhari, he was sitting here last year in Islamabad from Kashmir, that he told truth to power. He died for it. Somebody just coming and going, just bravely. Some of you may not even know his name. There are many nameless heroes like that. So when people are fighting resistance battles, you can't always, I mean, we still do, that's the nature of human lives, to be functional, but you can't. I told the BBC presenter, I said, do you really think I can go back to my coffee latte right now when I'm getting this message? Do you really think most of Pakistan can do that when they get this message? He found it sobering. His tone changed. And he said, let's do this again. So I think each one of us needs to do what we can. We need to gather our forces, strengthen our center, and look at many of the questions. The policy community also has a huge responsibility. We are not telling you to go out there and be resistance fighters, that we double up for that. But you have a responsibility to now put together a series, and you shouldn't even take a week. What are you thinking about? And this goes for Jinnah Institute too. Get this done by tomorrow. What are your policy options? This is the passport you hold, this is the identity you hold. Kashmir may or may not be important to you, but Pakistan is. And let me assure you that Pakistan is at a serious crossroads. This may go into a conflagration, or this may not if we are lucky. But luck and hope is not a plan. And I don't see planning in quarters fast enough. They should have been planning. 4 days ago on Twitter, I remember the date, 1st or 2nd. I'm an ordinary citizen, well, a little more than ordinary citizen. And I said, look, read between the lines. The divisions are moving. Indian print media is saying 180,000 troops moving to Indian-held Kashmir. We're calling it Indian-held. For them, it's Kashmir now. It's Union territory. How do we challenge this done deal? What is the state of our lawfare? Is the Foreign Office even using this term? Because the Indian one is, let me assure you. They have a huge office of public diplomacy while we're still reading our scripts. Right? With our little French paras. No, the world has changed. The world is now about the narrative, the public diplomacy, the speaking, calling out the New York Times. Everybody's praising this New York Times editorial. I read it today, and I said, you know what? It's saying, and I said, dear New York Times, thank you for taking a position on Kashmir, on the humanitarian crisis at least, because they have. So give them some credit for that. You don't alienate everybody. You make allies. But I said, what is India has now become a majoritarian democracy? Excuse me, what's that? What is a majoritarian democracy? And I asked them, what is a majoritarian democracy? Democracies are by definition majoritarian. You have 6 in the National Assembly extra, you're a majority. That's how it works. No, use the name you want to. Use call it the label you need to, which is authoritarian, intolerant, and frankly, if you're ethnically cleansing, which you are, there's a difference between genocide and ethnic cleansing. And there is chapter and verse by Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, in case people need to see it, on the right offices and use it. It's called the new fascism. That is what it's called. In Weimar Republic, this is exactly what the condition was. Now, had this happened in Pakistan, believe me, that label would have been fast and furious. And I'm not saying it because it would have happened, but at least use the tools you have. You have Twitter. Call them out. It doesn't take anything. So power is what you make of it. The session was supposed to be changing global power. Oh yes, global power is changing. But global power has changed, and if you go back to the, I don't know, 200 years before, there were the Dark Ages. They were called the Dark Ages for a reason. Power was only based on brute force. Life was Hobbesian, nasty, brutal, and short. And if all of you, those of you who saw Game of Thrones and who are addicts of it, you remember what they said to Cersei? Somebody said, some clever advisor said, oh, Madam Princess or Queen or whatever, knowledge is power, the old cliche. And she said, no, power is power. Is that the world we are going back to? Because that is what she said. She did not need legitimacy. She did not need to be democratic. She did not need to be answerable to anybody. That is how civilization has changed over the 200 years. Are we going back to that? The done deal is telling us that. And the West is not going to comment. We do not need to catch up with their commentary. We need to create our own. Make your own history, write your own history. It is always the victor's version or the powerful version. Power, as any woman or any vulnerable community will tell you, is never given, and it is not taken from a comfort zone. It doesn't happen, as I said to somebody, by going to the Sin Club when they still don't allow you to be a full voting member. Separate aside. Next year's session on elite parochialism. But here it is. You have to pay a price. You have to, burn the woman hours, do whatever it is in your agency to change the world around you, and power must be rooted in legitimacy. What was the United Nations all about after the Second World War? What was it all about? It's falling apart now. Yeah, yes it is. But call it out. Is human rights only going to be about a watch and an NGO? Just an alert and a funding source for think tanks that self-congratulate each other and scratch each other on their backs? Or is it going to mean something? Because when the West feels like it means something, doesn't it? That's what the big soft power game was about, and now China is projecting it only economically, and China is being called out. Oh, its human rights don't match up. Well, let's just call out everybody for their human rights, including ourselves. We had a stellar session on our own deficits. Our own deficits. We have many. But let's not accept and normalize everything. And it may be done. You may be railing and ranting against it for the rest of your living lives. But are you just going to accept it? That's a decision we all need to make collectively and in Parliament. I never said Kashmir banega Pakistan. I don't want Pakistan to go into a conflagration. I need to ask Kashmir kya khud banega. We have given them that right. They need to decide. And perhaps they want to become Pakistan. But they are stakeholders. It's not a piece of territory. We can't treat it like India. India has treated it like a backwater. It can just completely annex, and it has done that. Now let's call it what it is. Everybody got very excited, 370, we never believed in 370, we didn't 35A. No, we didn't, because we didn't accept the accession of Kashmir, right? That's the logic, right? But then what's all this hangama about? They have taken the last fig leaf away. as Salman Bashir said to me yesterday. तो उनकी भी तो कोई हुकूक हैं, they have some rights. And we have parties in Azad Kashmir, we have political parties and people who will be burning our phone lines through Eid. Let me assure you, we'll have no Eid. Those are our lives. Because they will, you may even have a set of refugees. People may be saying now, what happens to CPEC? Well, we have to assure all CPEC projects are clear and running and secured. Only the one on Neelam Jhelum needs extra security. The rest are secured. The rest of Pakistan must stay secured. It will stay secured. For crying out loud, we have a huge military and they are assuring us you are secured. But let's secure us by building our own capacity to govern ourselves. The whole CPEC conversation was that. It's not the Chinese that are slowing it down. We are slowing it down because we can't connect the dots, because we can't get the political consensus together to get it going, because politics is not about just calling each other out, it's about sitting in a room and